Hello all, and welcome back to yet another AP Computer Science tutorial video. Today we're going to be talking about lists. So lists are very similar to arrays, which I covered in my previous video. It'd be very helpful to know the basics of arrays first. They're very similar in that lists are also a collection of one type of data structure, and they can hold both primitives and objects, although technically they only hold objects because when you put a primitive into a list, it gets converted to an object, but that doesn't affect the way it works very much, so I'm not going to go into that in depth. There are a lot of differences between lists and arrays, and a lot of these differences often make lists a better option to use in your programs. Sometimes arrays are better, but I'm just going to go over a quick list of the differences between lists and arrays. First of all, lists are dynamic, not fixed. And this is probably one of the biggest differences. So what this means is that, as you know, in an array, when you create the array, you have to specify the size of the array in brackets, right? So say you wanted 10 items in there, put a little 10 in brackets. Well, when you create a list, you don't have to put that size in there. They're dynamic, so the size will automatically change as you add or create new items. And when I get to an example later on, you'll see how that works. Again, as I mentioned, lists can hold objects or primitives, but if you put a primitive in, what it does is Java automatically wraps the primitive into an object that can then be taken back into a primitive later on, which is pretty convenient. And that is something that you probably won't be using as much, but it's still important to know. Lists do not use brackets like arrays do. So again, you'll see in my example, but that's not how you access values in lists. And instead, lists use methods to access and modify their values, which again, you'll see. And I'm going to give an example here to show you the various methods that are important to know. I've set up another class here in this program called the student class. So what this does here is the student class provides a template of a student that would be in any class in your school. So each student has a grade that they're in. So, it can be grade 11 if they're a junior, 10 if they're a sophomore, and so on. And a name, so just their basic name. Here's the constructor, and I've only added accessor methods. I haven't even put any mutator methods in because I don't really need them for this example, but you can, of course, do whatever you want in your own programs. So we have name and a grade and get name and get grade methods. So in my main method over here, and I put this statement in here to make the creating of the list a little easier. You'll see what I mean in a second. So you declare a list by writing array list, and this is what you need the import statement for, because that array list would not, it's just easier to use this. You have more options with the import statement. You write array list with a little arrow pointing left, I don't know, open caret, whatever you want to call that, and the type of object that you want inside. So I'm going to be putting students in this list, so I'm going to write student there. And then the name of the variable that will refer to this list, so just call that students. Gets new. This indicates that you're initializing a new list. And here, once again, we write array list with the little carets, sideways carets, whatever those are. Those don't have to have the object inside them. And then in parentheses, I'm just going to make it an empty list for now, so I'll just leave that blank. So this here just creates a new list. And I'm going to show you the first important method that you have to know for modifying lists. So this is the .add method. This is something that you can't really do in an array. If say the array is already filled up, you can't just add another thing because it's filled up. In a list, it'll just create another spot for it. So say I wanted to add a student to my list. So I write students, add. And if you already had a student declared and initialized, you could just put the name of that object in there, but I don't have any, so I'm just going to create a new one here right in the add method. So a new student, and using the constructor, I'll put the name in first. So let's say Ben is the name, and maybe he's a junior, so he'll be in 11th grade. And that right there just adds a new student into the list. And I'm just going to copy this add statement twice, just to put a couple of students in there. So we have, I don't know, John, maybe he's a sophomore, grade 10, and Sarah. Also, we'll make her a junior too. All right, so we have 3 students in this list, and that, well, okay, so I'm going to, I'll go through the methods that you need to know for a list. So the next method, just to connect this back to arrays and strings both of those data types have different ways to get the length of, let's say, the number of characters in a string or number of items in an array. Well, in a list, what you would type is the name. So I'm just going to print this out. Sorry, system.out.println as always. And I'll just write students dot size. So this is different from the other two. This is not dot length. With lists, you use dot size with the parentheses there. So we're printing out students dot size, and this will just print out 3 because there are 3 students in that list. So dot size is the first important method you need to know. Another important method is, so you already know dot add, dot size, and there is dot get. So I'm going to print out students dot get. This is how you would access one item in a list. So let's say we had an array named students, and we wanted to access Ben. That would be, I'm just going to type that here, students 0, right? Because Ben is the 0th student, if you want to think of it that way. Because in programming, 0 comes first. Well, here it's dot get of the index. So dot get 0, that would access Ben. And then if we, let's say we want to print out his name. So here is the Ben object, and then we could print out dot get name, because that, that should return a string. I forget how I set that up earlier, but yep, and that prints out Ben. So that all worked out as desired. So that's the basics of the dot get method. And 1 would give you John, 2 would give you Sarah here. Now we have the dot set method. And dot set is similar to dot add, but dot add just adds another student to the end of the list. So if I put dot add another student here, I'm just going to copy this statement again. And I don't know, we could add another name in here, Joe, who is a senior. That would add a 4th student. However, if I use the dot set, and I'm going to put, so the way dot set works is you put an index and then the object. So say I put 0, that's the index, and then this is the object here, right there. So what this is going to do is it's going to set the object at the 0th index to the new object that I put in. And so that what that would do is it changes Ben to Joe here. And if I print out the name of the 0th student there, what this should do is it would print out Joe, just like that. So that's pretty simple. You just put an index and then an object for the dot set method. And the last of the important methods that you need to use and know for the AP test, and again, there are a lot of other ones too, but as always, these are just the basics that the AP requires knowledge of, is dot remove, and that's pretty straightforward. So students dot remove, and this just takes an index. So this Ben is at index 0 right here, and John is at index 1, and Sarah is at index 2. So say I just wanted to remove John right from the middle, then I could use students.remove 1, the index goes in there, and what that'll do is it'll just push the end of the list down. So now Sarah is at index 1. So if I print out .get 1, or students.get of 1.get name, then that should just print out Sarah, and there we go. So yeah, in a lot of ways, lists are a lot more simple than arrays because it deals with the length a lot more easily. It really depends on the kind of situation that you're in, but overall, lists are very useful and imperative for your knowledge of the AP test. So yeah, so these are the basics of lists, and again, you can apply any other knowledge you know to it. So, for example, a traversal with an array, you would use brackets with the index inside in each instance of the loop, each iteration, to access each object or each data point, whereas in a list, you just use the .get method to access that. It's pretty much just a simple alternative. So yeah, those are the basics of the list, and good luck in preparing for the AP test and learning all this knowledge. All right, thank you, and hope you watch some of our other videos.